Lots of remixes I've heard before aren't always vastly different from originals. Any pro advice? I'm being so judgy here. Do you have any music production or mixing tips that made you improve a lot? Have you put your order in for that 50k Mac Pro yet? I just found out that I have tinnitus. Just wondering if you're still planning another mixdown series in the near future. At risk of turning this into a cookery AMA, what's your secret to good pork crackling? Super hyped about your idea of creating a label. If you've thought about it, what would be the general art direction of your label? Hey guys, and welcome to the Kane audio vlog. It is Friday. It's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video. Before I look at last week's video, is there any house admin? What has been going on this week? It was general election day yesterday, therefore election results are out today in the UK. I really don't have much to say about that. I don't want to make this a politics video, and I'm still kind of processing the results, to be honest. It's interesting, to say the least. What else has happened this week? I can't think of anything else that's worth talking about. I think I mentioned last week that the Lots of IDs in a Row mix I did was uploaded by Mousetrap, so that's all up. I've learned to talk. I've updated the tonal display playlist on Spotify. So for any of you guys that follow that Spotify playlist, there's a whole fresh 2 hours-ish in there. So that's good. I think that's about it for house admin. I can't think of anything else. I'm sure someone is going to comment below this video telling me a track of mine came out today or something that I've completely forgotten about. But there we go. Such as life. You know me by now. If you're watching these AMAs, you've now watched what? This will be the 82nd video, so yeah, whatever. Anyway, let's have a look. Ricky John, election, high five. Exciting to hear you've put some thought into starting your own label again. It'd be very interesting to hear which direction you'd take that in, as Darktronica and your last EP have been absolutely fantastic in my opinion. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, so I've been thinking about that even more, and yeah, there's definitely a little flame burning for this at the minute, so yeah, let's watch this space. I've been talking to a few people, and so far everyone I've spoken to, of the 4 people, everyone seems very up for it. So it's yeah, it's still just an idea, but it's starting to reach fruition. As for direction, it's kind of tricky to say, because I think there isn't really much out there at the minute that's in this space. So what I want it to be is not your average 4/4. Basically, whatever the opposite of a club banger is, and that's kind of what I want, I suppose. Yeah, again, I think if you know, for those of you watching this who've watched 82 of these AMAs, I think you get a good idea of what I'm talking about. So yeah, there we go. Gold Toast. Oh, sorry, hang on. No, there's a part 2 to your comment. Speaking of labels, I just today started on a track for a remix contest, one of the prizes of which could be getting a track onto what I'd describe as a fairly small label. I feel like I should be radically trying to alter the original, but I'm also hesitant to stray too far from the original style or sound too much. A lot of remixes I've heard before aren't always vastly different from originals. Any pro advice? Yeah, that's kind of a tricky one. So there's a few things to look out for. First of all, you haven't named the label. That's fine. It's not a problem. I would look at that label's catalogue, and there are kind of two distinct things to judge them on. First of all, look at their catalogue for the last, say, 12 months or so. It gives you a better idea, because I think we all change direction over 2, 3, 4 years. So look at their last 12 months of releases, and I would say, is there anything left field amongst their catalogue? For example, have they put out, let's pretend they're a techno label, have they put out a couple of EPs that have maybe a bit of a breaksy vibe or a bit of a just melody or something different? If they've done that, then they're obviously more open-minded than just strictly techno. So, however, if on the flip side to that, their entire 12 months worth of releases are purely just singles and they are just one style of, say, 4 to the floor techno and, you know, with an eighth note offbeat bass line or something, then clearly that's the only thing they're interested in, and in which case you kind of need to keep your remix to fit that style. So I think those are the two things to look out for. Secondly, I suppose, is a bit of a more difficult one to word, let alone follow. I quite often judge a label or a brand or whatever on how they think their image comes across, if that makes sense. So without naming names, there are definitely some labels, and I'm sure that when I talk about these, certain names will come to your head. There are definitely some labels out there who release, for example, tech house. And if you look at their Instagram or whatever, it's purely, the artists in front of private jets, or just everything looks super cool, or a latte in New York High Street. I don't know, just, for lack of a better word, just basic generic shit. But it's high fashion stuff. I think that, to me, says a lot about a label on how they perceive themselves. And generally you'll see, as a sort of clincher to that deal, you'll see if they don't ever respond to people on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever, there's just 0 replies, then you know that musically they're going to be very, very narrow-minded. I'm being so judgy here, but I feel like I'm not wrong. Please tell me if you think I'm wrong. But I feel like the kind of label or brand that never responds to fans or comments or whatever, and only ever posts super cool looking, high fashion imagery, tends to be incredibly narrow-minded musically and only follows one style. That's how I tend to see it. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope there are labels out there who are super cool and also nice people. But who knows? So I think that's kind of where you need to be looking, is look at the label's history, because so when I did my remix competition with Sonic Academy, I was lucky that the label endorsing that was Mousetrap, so I could kind of, there was a bit of leeway. But we all know that Mousetrap has a sound, and in fact Sistemes won that competition and is now a Mousetrap artist, and that's great. And when I judged the competition, I kind of judged it with a view to assuming that could or should or would be the case. So I know, for example, I forget who it was now, but one of you sent in fact, there might have been two, but definitely one of you sent in a drum and bass remix, which I loved. And I know Mousetrap had kind of done some drum and bass, so they were open to it. So there was a lot of leeway to do that. But then I felt, well, if you won that competition and you had your remix released on Mousetrap, looking further ahead to the future, I don't know if that would have helped. And also doing drum and bass, I know the drum and bass community is kind of cliquey. Would a Mousetrap release help you in that community? Probably not. So that's kind of where I was with it. So I can't speak on behalf of that label because I don't know what the label is, but there's a lot to consider there. So in terms of remixes though, if you can't change the genre, change the vibe. That's always my thing. So for example, whenever I've done a remix, I've always tried to infuse maybe a new melody on top or something that just adds to it and changes. So if it was maybe a naturally dark and dingy moody bass line or whatever, putting on a really nice light melody on top that just kind of obviously don't make it cheesy, but it changes the overall vibe. Hopefully that helps. I don't know. Let us know, I suppose. Gold Toast. Hey Dom, how about that election? High five. Yes, how about that election? My question for this week: do you have any music production or mixing tips that made you improve a lot, that you wish you had learnt earlier? If not, what are some general tips you feel are useful? It's always kind of tricky with those things because I think you always, at the beginning, you learn huge things that you feel are life-changing, but give it 6 months and you feel like, actually, they're not life-changing at all. And then the longer you go into it, I never stop learning, but the things I learn now tend to be just slight tweaks here and there. So there aren't any sort of things that I can think of that are just game-changing. The first thing that comes to mind, however, is I think something that made my job easier on myself is when I started exporting my projects as audio stems and then re-importing them as a fresh project and treating that as the mixdown. I think that definitely changed the way I look at things in terms of a mixdown, because it meant that by committing everything to audio stems, it was always, if you, let's say you write a track, it's 5 minutes long, you're happy with it, it's all good, and then you go, right, okay, now's the time to do the mixdown, and you just work on the project you're working on. You'll find yourself going, oh, that bass line's a bit loud, I'll bring the gain down. You bring the gain down and you think, no, it's not that, maybe it needs a filter, so you chuck a filter on it, and then you start playing around with the filter and you think, yeah, now it's got a bit of resonance in such and such frequency. Maybe what I need to do is change it from a triangle wave to a saw wave or something. I need to change the waveform. So then you open up the VST and you start tweaking that. And then once you've tweaked that, you then think, okay, that's fixed the bass line, but now that's opened up something else for whatever. The melody doesn't fit or whatever, and then you start opening that up, and you end up chasing your own tail, and you're on this constant wild goose chase. And I just felt, getting a mixdown done could take anything from days to weeks, whereas if you get your project to a state where you're like, right, I'm happy with this track, bounce it all down as audio stems, re-import it into a new project, and now you can't open those VSTs, you can't look at those things. So if that bass line, for example, was annoying you, you either stick a filter on it and try and tweak whatever it is you can and find what the annoying bit was through strictly mixdown processes, or you get to a point where you're like, this is ridiculous, I'm going to have to start again. So you delete that project, open up the original project, start making your changes, and then start all over again. And by doing that, you annoy yourself so much that your productions become better by forcing yourself to do a more difficult mixdown. And that's kind of the catch-22 of it all, because the first 5, 6, 10, 20 times you do this, you're probably going to go, I didn't do this, or I got this bit wrong, or whatever. And then, right, open up the original project, right, make those tweaks, bounce it all down again. It takes maybe 5, 10 minutes to export, and then 5, 10 minutes to import. And, but it forces you get annoyed with the way you labeled your channels, for example. And you then eventually start calling things bass line, hi-hats, kick drums, rather than KFX931XV2 or whatever, which is what our channels end up being called, or just Serum VST. When you then import that as an audio project and it just says Serum, and you're like, well, is that the bass line? Is that the lead line? I can't know. And so it forces you to then, when you're working back in your next project in, a week later or whatever, it forces you to label stuff better. It forces you to maybe arrange things slightly differently. For example, my projects now, I've always been a bit OCD, but my projects will always start with pretty much the drums and everything at the beginning, then it'll be bass, then it'll be leads, and then it'll be effects. So, I'll have FX1, FX2, FX3, whatever, at the bottom. And the reason for this is because then my mixdowns are all similar, which means that if there's a reverse cymbal with a load of reverb in the mix and I'm like, God, that's too loud, I know exactly where it is. It's at the end of the channels because it's in the effects section. If the kick drum is annoying me, I know exactly where to go. It's channel 1 because my kicks are always on channel 1. So I think, weirdly, as much as it doesn't sound like a drastic game-changing thing, I think doing something as simple as that, for me, changed my whole sort of workflow and made things a bit easier after the 10th, 11th, 12th time of screwing it up. I think I got better at it. And also, it kind of forces you to commit to a project where you have to, before you start your mixdown, you have to sit there and listen to it and go, is this ready for a mixdown? Am I happy with this track? Is this actually finished? Because I don't want to have to export all the stems, import all the stems, mix all the stems, find a mistake, and then start all over again. It's not something I want to do, so I have to sit here and just listen to it and go, is this ready? Is this ready for a mixdown? Are there any silly sound design changes or whatever melodic changes that I can do before I get to the mixdown? So hopefully that helps. Excuse me. Andrew Hollis, election, high five. Have you put your order in for that 50k Mac Pro yet? Do you know what I did? I didn't order one, but I did have a look at them. Let's have a look. store.apple.com/UK, if I remember rightly. Yeah. Mac and Mac Pro and buy. Choose your Mac Pro. I like the fact that they're doing a rack mount one. So they start at $5,500. Before I mention this, I know most of you are kind of at least computer nerds, if not Apple nerds. And I've also seen a lot of people on social media kind of slagging it off. And I know that, was it Andrew who just asked me this? Yeah. I know that you're only joking about the 50k Mac Pro. But I have seen a lot of people sort of go, who do they think they are, charging 50 grand for a computer, blah, 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 blah. For example, they're charging 22 grand for 1.5 terabytes of DDR4 RAM. Now, there's a couple of things to talk about there, because first of all, 1.5 terabytes, that's 1,500 gigabytes of RAM. I think I've got 16 gig on this, not 1,500. It's an obscene amount of RAM. But I haven't done the math, but you look at it at face value and you think, well, I've got 16 gig and I paid whatever for 16 gig of RAM. You know, surely 1.5 terabytes of RAM, you can get that cheaper on eBay than 22 grand. How dare Apple? But the point is I dare you to try and build a machine that can accept 1500 gig of RAM. Not only accept 1500 gig of RAM, but actually work and use 1500 gig of RAM. And that's kind of where the money's going with all of these things. You know, the fact that they're offering a 28 core CPU with turbo boost up to 4.4 gigahertz is just insane. You know, and again, they've got the dual graphics, so the dual Radeon Pro 2 Vega 2 Duo, so 2 times 32 gig of memory each. It's just ridiculous. And yeah, once you start specking it all up, like I just have done, you end up with £47,588. And that's probably before VAT. Yeah, that would make sense. It would be about 10 grand VAT or something on top of that. Anyway, whatever. The point is, is that, yeah, 50 grand is an insane amount of money to spend on a computer. But I think you probably get your money's worth if you're the kind of person that needs a 50 grand computer. Man, I would love to try one though. I wonder how quickly these AMAs will spit out. Yeah, that's quite funny. So yeah, there we go. That's my view on the Mac Pro. The other thing to remember, which I think I've mentioned before in these videos, so I won't talk for too long on it, but we have to remember that us music producers, we're not top of the food chain when it comes to computing power anymore. That's why I was able to get this iMac secondhand, because I don't need that much power. You know, I kind of wanted the upgraded graphics card, so I got the RX 580 because I do these AMAs, and you know, sometimes, as you well know, they're an hour long, and to spit out an hour long video can take quite a lot of graphics power. However, I'm now uploading them in 4K, even though they're not filmed in 4K, because the 1080p render conversion in YouTube comes out better if you upload it as 4K, which is very strange, but whatever. So some of these videos you might find are actually starting to look a little bit sharper, which pleases me. I doubt anyone's noticed. But I've forgotten why I was even talking about that. Oh yeah, the fact that, you know, we as music producers, we don't need that much power. You know, my Mac before this iMac was 11, almost 12 years old. It had 1 gig of crappy graphics. You know, and yeah, it took a long time to export, but it really wasn't, you know, it wasn't life changing. So yeah, so the 50 grand Mac Pros, I've seen a lot of music producers, pro producers, slag them off because it was only 10 years ago that we were sort of top of the food chain with things like DSP and UAD cards and the accelerator cards and stuff like that. And, you know, our VSTs were really CPU hungry, and CPUs weren't quite quick enough to really push things. It was quite a regular basis that you would, you know, you'd have, say, the Mac Pro before mine, so pre-2009 Mac Pro, you know, they would kind of struggle with certain things when you're running them in Ableton. Certain VSTs would struggle, and even still the 2009 Mac Pro, there were certain VSTs that just used up all the CPU, but that's not how it is anymore, because those, you know, as technologies progressed and technologies got better, normally software gets better and more hungry with it, whereas we kind of reached a bit of, I wouldn't say it's a limit of that, but we've certainly sort of tailed off a bit. You know, VSTs, whatever amount of CPU they needed 10 years ago, probably pales in comparison to the amount of CPU available today. So yeah, we don't need a 50 grand machine, or certainly not today anyway. So there we go. Zombo, election, high five. Have a great weekend, Dom. I just found out that I have tinnitus, but it does not really bother me that much. I thought everybody had it. I was wrong. Should I worry about that in the future? And is there something I can't do that other producers can because of this? So first of all, sorry to hear that. Second of all, every case of tinnitus is slightly different to my understanding. There are some people who have, say 10 kilohertz tinnitus. Other people have 15 kilohertz, and it depends on where it sits with you and how loud it is and when it happens. So for some people, it only really kicks in when they're a bit stressed out, or if they've had maybe a lack of sleep. For other people, it's 24 hours a day. For some people, it doesn't bother them on a daily basis, whereas for some people, they can't sleep because of it and they get insomnia because of it. It keeps them up at night and must be horrific. So I kind of have to say that first because I don't know what your case is. So for some people, things like mixdowns become incredibly difficult because it can interfere with hi-hats, and most people like to do a mixdown at that sort of not too loud but loud enough sort of volume where it just starts matching the tinnitus, and it can interfere sometimes. I've known at least one very famous DJ who I've DJ'd with, and he suffers quite badly with tinnitus, and he had to change. He actually stopped DJing for a couple of years because of depression off the back of it, and had to basically relearn how to DJ, because I think most people, when they DJ, they're listening to the hi-hats, they're listening to the higher frequency noises and the claps or whatever to get the beats in sync. And he had to relearn how to do it with the kick drums. And so at the beginning of a track, so he'd probably hate my tracks because none of them start with a kick drum very often, or certainly no low frequencies. So I know that was difficult for him. So some people, I wouldn't say they can't do it, they just have to do it differently, basically, and that's the important bit. So I think the most important thing I'm saying here is, to my understanding, it shouldn't be detrimental to anyone. It just means that maybe there are some things where you might need to just get a second opinion, but it shouldn't interfere too much. The only other thing I will say, and I'll say this to everyone right now, when you go to gigs, wear earplugs, and I highly recommend you go get some proper earplugs. If you're in the UK, go to your local Boots opticians, and they'll do a hearing thing as well, where they do the hearing tests. They will are mine here somewhere? No, I don't know where mine are, but so I have the in-ear earplugs, and what they do is you go into the chemist optician's hearing place, and they basically inject your ear with a load of silicone mold, and they take a mold of the inside of your ear, then they send that off, and then the factory make an earplug the perfect shape of your ear, so you sort of put it in and twist it into your ear canal, so it's a super comfortable fit because it's designed for your ears and your ears only. And then you've got a tiny little filter that you can pop out of these things, and they've got the ER10, I think, which reduces 10 dB, the ER15 reduces 15 dB, the ER20, and so on. And I think I started with the 20 dBs, and I found that was a bit weird. I couldn't DJ with it. I was fine if I went to a club and just listened, but I couldn't really DJ with it. Whereas whatever I ended up on, I think they were the lower, certainly below recommendations. But every time I've ever worn them, I've never come out of a club with my ears ringing, and that's the important bit. My ears were never ringing after a gig, and whereas before I used these things, it'd be most gigs, especially for me because I like my monitors up full blast. So yeah, hugely important. If you ever want a career in music or to hear your children or grandchildren speak, then protect your ears. You know, we've only got 2 of them, and when they're gone, they're gone. I couldn't be clearer than that. So yeah, look after your ears. I'm just going to reset the camera because I can see it's on 29 minutes and 30 seconds. Back in a sec. I was just looking left of camera and it's still dark outside. What the hell is going on? I hate winter. Anyway, so yeah, Zombo, I hope that your tinnitus doesn't bother you too much. You say it doesn't bother too much, so that's good. Yeah, I don't think it would have any major impact, or it shouldn't have, especially if it doesn't bother you. You know, like I say, some people find there's a bit of an interference in listening to things like hi-hats and just judging the clarity of hi-hats or whatever. But I think for the vast majority of people, that's not really a problem. So there we go. Sunset86, election, high five. Hey Dom, good shout out to Walter/Wendy Carlos, a true pioneer of electronic music. Must mention my own hero of electronic music, Jean-Michel Jarre. I recall the first time I heard Oxygen as a kid and how much it blew me away and felt like I'd been sent to Mars, lol. Yeah, 100%. I think I felt pretty much the same, to be honest, with Oxygen. No tech questions this week, but just wondering if you're still planning another Mixdown series in the near future. I wasn't, but I feel like I probably should now you mention it. Yeah, I need everyone here to keep reminding me of these things because I have the world's worst memory. Yeah, so I held back on doing a second Mixdown series for YouTube because I knew I was doing one for Sonic Academy. Which has now been and gone, and if you haven't checked it out, please do check it out. I was really proud of that Mixdown, actually. I felt like I actually ended up doing a better Mixdown than I'd done for the actual release, which was a bit unfortunate, but these things happen. So yeah, so I think I might look at doing another Mixdown series. Yeah. It'd be quite nice if I can get one that maybe is not standard 4/4. Don't know, you tell me actually. Do you want one that's like a club track and just, you know, tech house techno, or would you rather something that's maybe a bit left field or a bit, I don't know, just different for whatever reason? I feel like most of you watching this tend to be tech house techno, progressive, whatever. So it might be more helpful to do it that way, but at the same time might be more interesting to do a different genre. I don't know. You tell me. Yeah, let's keep that conversation going. Cavacay, election, high five. At risk of turning this into a cookery AMA, what's your secret to good pork crackling? It's my nemesis. Sometimes my crackling is amazing. Sometimes it's bloody awful. I cook a mean roast, so it's just getting embarrassing that my crackling doesn't measure up. Also, on the subject of... okay, you're changing subject there. So, crackling. The trick I found is in fact I think I took a picture of one a couple of weeks ago. I'll hopefully, as I'm talking right now, you're looking at a picture of one of my pork shoulders. So for me, the trick is, first of all, take it out the fridge a good 10, 15, 20 minutes before you put it in the oven, before you even want to do anything with it, because you want to get, so I'm assuming you're talking about a pork shoulder, you want to get all the moisture out of it, basically, because moisture is your enemy. So by having it in a fridge, it's going to build up a bit of moisture, and it's meat, it's organism, it's going to have some moisture in. So that's quite important. So I tend to sort of pat it dry with like kitchen roll, and keep doing that, and then let it come down to room temperature a bit more, and you'll notice it might have sweat a bit more as well. So again, pat it dry. The other thing you want to do is make sure you score it really well. You want nice deep scores, and I know it's a nightmare to score into, because, well, it is literally cutting into leather. So you need a good sharp knife for that. But you want some good healthy score lines. Then the next thing is, you almost can't have too much salt, because the salt pulls the moisture out of the fat. So again, you want to put the salt on and then give it another 5 minutes and then pat it dry again, because you'll find putting all the salt on, leaving it 5 minutes, the moisture will come out of the fat again. And then to get the fat to render, you want good cooking oil, or any cooking oil, it doesn't need to be good cooking oil. And then the final thing is, set your oven to as hot as it'll go. I think mine is about 250 degrees centigrade, something like that. I set it to about 240, 250 centigrade for the first... I kind of play it by ear, but I would say at least 20 minutes, probably more commonly half an hour, sometimes up to 35, 40 minutes. But you will notice, and this is a fan oven, remember, so adjust your times accordingly. Yeah, and you just want it super high temperature to just sear that fat on the top. Yeah, and yeah, I guess that's basically, it's not really a trick, but that's as long as you get that combination of things and you get it right. Hopefully I've given you enough information to work on. But yeah, that's my thing. And yeah, it took a few attempts at sort of adjusting a few bits here and there to get it right, to get the whole thing to crackle. But yeah, there we go. Also, on the subject of missing out on Daft Punk, you couldn't be more disappointed in me than I am myself. But in my defence, it was around the time my son was born. Oh well, fair enough. Still, you managed to get to see Chemical Brothers, so I'll just shut up. So yeah, I booked Chemical Brothers before my son was even conceived, so it was kind of already on the cards, in your defence. In response to Gold Toast's questions last week on getting signed, my mate's experience with getting releases signed mirrors your comments, Dom. After a couple of years learning the ropes, he fired off demos to all the big labels, got nothing back. Eventually got into a conversation with a DJ at a festival who just happened to be setting up a new label. My mate played him a demo there and then on his phone. The guy loved it. 6 months later, got his first vinyl EP release. Over a year after that, he's had 2 more EPs signed to different labels. Smaller labels are that are focused on the music he makes. He's very, very good at networking and seems to know half the industry, plus he has a formidable work ethic and doesn't seem to be afflicted by procrastination and self-doubt. That means he always has something ready to play someone, and frequently gets out there and puts himself in the position where he may have the opportunity to send or play someone his music. So yeah, I did say last week, a handshake is worth 1,000 emails, and I stand by that. It absolutely is. You know, it. Yes, obviously let's all assume you're already making good music and appropriate music and whatever. But yeah, if you can meet someone, if you can go down to the office or go to wherever they're based, or if they run a night, you know, that's the hardest part, is just crossing that initial line. But once you've made that contact, and got a conversation and shown to that person you're a human being and that you're okay and that you're not an absolute moron, and I think once you've got that across, because if I sent an email to a major record label right now, one that I've not previously spoken to, I'm just some guy on email, I'm just some guy off the internet. I'm not, you know, they don't know who I am. I don't know who they are. I don't know their sense of humour. They don't know my sense of humour. There's nothing, there's no clues, there's no giveaways. Whereas if you can meet someone and have a coffee with them or anything along those lines, you get to know people. And, you know, and that's when you make friends. And that's, I think, the important part to getting signed to a good label. You know, if you want the label to be good for you, then you need to meet these people. Also, There's a lot of false info out there about how life-changing it actually is to sign a record deal. My mate's success in getting his track signed has been largely from an artistic perspective. The financial aspect has made very little material difference to his life. Yeah, and again, that's one of the reasons I set up this whole AMA thing, is because I kind of feel it's important to get across that, you know, getting signed to Mousetrap didn't mean that I could suddenly start flying private jets everywhere and start touring the world. I'm not busy gigging. I have a few gigs here and there, but nothing major. And I know some of the artists on Mousetrap are gigging all the time, and that's great for them. But it doesn't, you know, one doesn't lead to the other necessarily, unless you're maybe with certain management teams or whatever, and in which case the focus becomes gigs. But for me, I was never really particularly interested in getting managed. I'm always open to offers if I think the management team is right for me. And I've always said maybe one day it'll happen, but it's got to be right. And, you know, they need to love me and I need to love them. And I'm not easy to love. So, I don't see myself getting signed to management anytime soon. And yeah, so there's a lot in that. And I think, you know, also getting signed to a big record label can lead to gigs if you make it lead to gigs. If you start pushing it to promoters, whatever it is you want to be doing, you know, it's about, you need to take control of your releases and use them to your advantage for whatever your goal is. You know, for me, the last few years, my goal has not been to go on tour or whatever, you know, so it's not really in my interest to try and brown nose promoters and go, hey, I've got my release out. You know, I prefer you guys watching this video now, and, you know, I'd rather tell you that my release is out, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. That's okay. But the monetary aspect, I'm very lucky that, you know, I have sound design clients, mix down clients. I do TV syncs work and production music stuff and sample stuff, and you know, there's a lot of jobs that I do that tend to earn my bread and butter money, which is how I can afford a roof over my head and food on a plate. And getting signed to bigger labels means better revenue, but again, you've got to push them in the right direction, and it doesn't, there's no guarantees, is what I'm saying. So, you know, for example, with Mousetrap, you know, you could have a single out on Mousetrap and it could go, say, Beatport #1, and it could do all sorts of things, but there's no guarantee that you're going to make huge amounts of money. Yeah. It's not, you know, there's definitely far from guaranteed life-changing anyway. So there we go. But congratulations to you, mate. And the fact that you're focusing on success from an artistic perspective is very commendable. So good for you. FanFan87, Saludom, Boom and Election, high five and high five. Super hyped about your idea of creating a label. If you've thought about it, what would be the general art direction of your label? Would it be more Darktronica orientated, or more Stoic / Structures EPs, or even more the kind of material you signed on Zeton Records back in the days? So I would say of those, it would definitely be more Darktronica than the other two. So Zeton Records was looking at just club bangers. I want to do the opposite of that. I want to do something for the love of it. Stoic and Structures, I mean, they're kind of club bangers-y type, underground bangers, I suppose. And again, I kind of want to veer away from that because there are so many other people doing that already and they do a better job than me. So I don't think I'm doing anything necessarily very original. I don't think, you know, those two EPs, for example, I've tried to be as original as I can be, and I don't think I'm being formulaic. So I'm not dissing myself, but I don't think I'm reaching my potential with those, I think is what I'm trying to say. Whereas with Darktronica, I feel like I'm pushing things a little bit more. So that's kind of where I want the label to sit. And I think one of the important things in my head right now for the label would be, from an A&R perspective, I wouldn't be looking at, will this go down well in a nightclub on a Saturday night at 4 o'clock in the morning. The question would more be, could I hear this on TV during a sci-fi film or TV show or something? Is there something? Can I picture a moving image in my head to it? Has it triggered some sort of image in my head? If the answer is yes, then that's the kind of music I'm looking for. So yeah, hopefully that answers. Definitely have some things to send you, considering my inspiration coming from some recent tracks of yours. Well, thank you very much, and I will definitely be opening when it happens, if it happens. Let's be honest, when it happens, I think it's probably going to happen. But as and when that happens, yeah, I will definitely be opening up A&R to anyone. But I will also say that I would like to be running a label where there are maybe between 5 and 10 regular artists who regularly contribute. So yeah, there we go. I think that is it. The final one is Yanis Lekmelis, Election, High Five. Yeah, I think that is it, my friends. Yes, it is. I don't even know how long it's been, 45 minutes or so. Pretty long. So if you've made it this far into the video, then comment the word Ibiza, because the video here says Ibiza Classics live at the O2 Arena London. I'm assuming that's the Pete Tong thing. So comment the word Ibiza and you'll get a high five in next week's video. As usual, please do comment anything you want below this video. I do like these questions, whether they be about pork crackling or whether they be about record labels or getting signed or mixdowns, whatever it is you want. I'm here for you. So I will see you next week. How far are we from Christmas now? Be 21st next Friday, so before Christmas Eve, so we're fine. So maybe not next Friday, but the Friday after that, I guess. I will see if I can wear my Christmas jumper, might have a glass of Baileys or something. So start thinking of your Christmas related music production questions, if you will, and save them for not next week but the week after. So I'm going to write that down in house admin, so next week I remind you to post them the following week. Yeah, okay, see you next week. Cheers.